ladies and gentlemen, the question has always remained, who shot Tupac? Let's deal with it from the grand jury transcripts, from the bombshell revelations that it reveals. Some true, and some we know are false. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get into some of this straight game.
Blackjack. Life is like some cards. It's not what you dealt, but how you play it. Play each situation correctly. I remember they used to laugh at a brother.
Welcome back, guys. Welcome back. It's your boy Delray Richardson, platinum artist, platinum songwriter, Straight Game TV. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate your time. Do me a favor, click on the thumbs up button. Also subscribe to the channel. Like I always say, if you want to be one of the first people notified when I drop some of the straight game, please do me a favor and click on what appears to be that little bell notification right below this video. Before I get into this heavy dialogue that we're gonna have today, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to bring you, if you have not been informed yet, the Department of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, has been fired by Donald Trump. Alex Pretty's murder, the other young lady who was shot in Minnesota, if you will, those things happened. But yesterday there was a hearing on Capitol Hill, and basically she was fired. I would say overall she was fired for basically snitching on Donald Trump, if you will. Donald Trump had told Reuters News that he did not approve a $200 million ad in where Kristi Noem was telling people to self-deport. Like, if you deport yourself, we'll give you money, like $1,000, I believe it was. And Donald Trump said that he didn't approve that. He told Reuters News he didn't approve of that $200 million ad campaign. That's a lot of money, $200 million. And so yesterday on Capitol Hill, the senator from Louisiana asked her, did Donald Trump approve of that $200 million ad campaign with just her telling people to self-deport? And she said, yeah, he did. And yesterday, and approximately, I would say 30 minutes ago, Kristi Noem was fired while giving a speech in Tennessee right now with the major cities conference. She was fired. So Kristi Noem is on her way back home. Yeah. And so, like I said, with that, I just wanted to let people know, if you didn't know about that, because a lot of people were complaining about her, how the, ICE and all of that stuff was going on. The person who was the head of the Department of Homeland Security has been fired. I think a lot of people are probably relieved by that. And yeah, so I just wanted to drop that on you. But ladies and gentlemen, the question that I'm most asked in regards to the Tupac situation is, who do I think shot Tupac, right? And under the circumstances that we're currently living under, with Keffe D being incarcerated right now and charged with the murder of Tupac Shakur with gang enhancements, to me, at this particular point, it really doesn't matter. To the public, a lot of people, it does matter. I think that what Keffe D said was sufficient enough for me. He said he was in the car. This is what happened. Once again, you got Suge Knight on the other side, who's saying that Orlando Anderson was not the shooter. Keffe D saying, yes, my nephew was the shooter because I handed him the gun. And because he said that Big Dre got cold feet, and he handed the gun to his nephew Orlando Anderson, who then commenced the shooting. Suge Knight, on the other hand, said that from his vantage point, or what he saw, that Orlando was not the shooter. Now, does that really matter at this particular point? Possibly, if that becomes a point of contention when they go to court. Meaning, if they're saying, okay, and I don't know this to be true, I would hope that it would be. Like I said, if Suge Knight was subpoenaed to court, if they subpoenaed Suge Knight to court, and I think that Suge Knight could help Keffe D way more than Diddy could. Once again, and this is the thing that most people really kind of overlook, you know, when they were talking about Diddy being able to come to court to be able to say, hey, you know what, Keffe D's lying. I never talked to him about, you know, putting a hit on Suge and Tupac and all of those things, right? I think what people really overlooked was the fact that that Suge Knight could be more of a help to Keffe D than Diddy ever could, because Suge Knight was in the car. And basically Keffe D said that him and Suge Knight locked eyes, right? They locked eyes, and, you know, he said, and they asked Keffe D, well, how do you know? He said, because, you know, we've been going to school together since, I believe Keffe D said they were in the 3rd grade. And so if Suge Knight was subpoenaed to court and Suge Knight testified that, hey, you know, Orlando Anderson wasn't the shooter, and I didn't see Keffe D in the car, I didn't see him in the car, then Keffe D walks. Keffe D would walk. He would essentially walk out of the courtroom, and there would be no conviction in the murder of Tupac Shakur. Do I think that's gonna happen? Do I think he could be, you know, if they don't call Suge Knight to basically, if they don't subpoena him, I would think that Keffe D's attorneys wouldn't be putting it out all on the line to try to see what they can do for their client. Would Suge Knight say anything? I doubt it. Would they be able to enter other evidence, like interviews from the Art of Dialogue and some of the stuff that he recently told on the Art of Dialogue? That would be a strong possibility if he were to go into court and actually, you know, testify on whose ever behalf. You know, looks bad on the prosecution, you know, from the defense perspective. You know, we heard Suge Knight had said one time, you know, free Keffe D. Now, for most people who didn't hear anything after that, like I said, that kind of reverberated a little bit louder than him being on the Art of Dialogue, telling him that's before he know. Suge Knight explained why he said the free Keffe D thing. That was before he had heard what Keffe D was saying and all that he had confessed to. You see what I'm saying? You got to remember, Suge Knight was in jail. So it's a lot of stuff that he didn't really hear and wasn't privy to from what Keffe D had been confessing to, you know, Greg Kading on these channels and doing all of this. But since he had heard what Keffe D had been confessing to and basically incriminating himself with, Suge Knight then changed his perspective, because his whole thing was is he didn't want to see anybody in jail. He didn't think anybody should be in jail. Not that Keffe D was not involved, but he himself just didn't want to see anybody in jail from that perspective. And so a lot of people didn't catch that. Like I said, once again, some people are going to catch what they're going to catch, and some people are going to let go other things that they don't feel like benefits their argument. You know what I mean? And I understand that. But the bigger picture is this. And after Suge Knight had found out about that, he began to talk about the things that Keffe D had been talking about and confirming it. And I always go back to when Keffe D was on Vlad, and he told him that, hey, yeah, me and Suge met up, and Suge told me, you know, he said they talked, but he didn't really get into it. But Suge got into what they talked about. Most people say, well, yeah, Suge's lying. Okay, cool. That's not for me to decide whether he's lying or not. You know what I mean? What he said was sufficient enough for me. He was there. Keffe D was there. And that's the reason why I said that Suge Knight would be able to help Keffe D. Not that he would, but in a real life, real scenario, dealing with reality situation, he would be able to help Keffe D a lot more than Diddy would, if you will. And so the question remains. Everybody always asking, hey, you know, who shot Tupac? Like I said, once again, Suge Knight said it wasn't Orlando Anderson. Other people say it wasn't Orlando Anderson. It was Big Dre. Then they go back to Yaki Gaddafi's interview saying that somebody light-skinned hand out of the window and all of these things. Once again, there's a lot of confusion there. But for me, and what I understand to be, it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. At this particular point, it really doesn't matter, because, and the reason why it doesn't matter is because Keffe D implicated himself in the murder. So it really wouldn't matter at this particular point. I do understand. Who do I think shot Tupac? Who I think had the motive to shoot Tupac from a retaliatory stance? It would be who Keffe D said, his nephew Orlando Anderson. Just from a retaliatory stance. You know, he was retaliating based on the fact that he had been jumped at the MGM Grand. You know, that's what like I said, and I'm just going on based on somebody who was there. Suge Knight says something else, right? I'm going with the not only the proximity, but the fact that it takes a lot for a person to actually go and tell on somebody in their family, or to incriminate somebody in their family for a crime. Meaning, Keffe D saying that his nephew did it, right? Most people would understand. Some people would understand. Even Billy Garland understood when I asked him, you know, did he think that Tupac was wrong for jumping on Orlando Anderson? And Billy Garland said, yeah, of course. You know what I mean? Pac was trying to show his loyalty, right? Like I said, one can take an action, but one can't not predict or say that the same opposite reaction will happen. So, you know, they jump, Orlando, and like I said, after that, for what I thought would appear to be to me, retaliation was just what it was. And so with that being said, it really doesn't matter at this particular point. Tell me in the comments, ladies and gentlemen, do you really think it matters who shot Tupac? Because the only person that's still alive that was in the car that, put themselves in the car is Keffe D. So would it matter? Would it matter? Because the person, if they're saying that Orlando did it, he wouldn't be able to be charged. You know what I mean? They saying Big Dre did it, he wouldn't be able to be charged, right? And then you come up with these people who got these conspiracy theories, right? And I like I said, a lot of people just say certain things from that perspective. We're not dealing with the conspiratorial aspect of it, meaning like who helped facilitate it, set it up, all of those things. I think those things are going to be revealed, as we get closer to court and they start going to court. I think it's going to be a lot that's going to be said that's probably going to blow some people's mind. Whether it's true or not, it's going to be up for your interpretation and for you to receive that and say, hey, you know what, I believe that, or I think that's plausible or not. So, like I said, the more than 500 pages of the grand jury transcripts connected to the Tupac Shakur murder have basically been made public. Some's been, some of the pages that, I clipped some of the stuff on there that was important to me in regards to, certain things that were revealed that were lied about, for almost 3 decades now, right? Abigail Green, I appreciate you. Thank you. A lot of stuff that's been, had been lied about, about the Nextel phones, the Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. saying that he spoke to Tupac. Have you seen the video that I did yesterday? Like I said, that video right there removes all doubt about what was known, what was unknown in regards to Reggie the Rat Wright Jr.'s playing ignorant, also lying about damn near 95% of what he had talked about, and just basically trying to pass the buck on somebody else. We know that Suge Knight has said that Keffe D told him that Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. security was involved. Listen to me, ladies and gentlemen. That security was involved with the murder of Tupac Shakur. Like I said, if it goes to trial, we're going to be hearing more about that, I'm sure. Like I said, they plan on doing some kind of documentary, and we're going to see what comes out with that. You know what I mean? Should be very interesting, right? But inside those transcripts are some of the most detailed allegations that we've ever seen about what led up to the night in Las Vegas in 1996 of September, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, remember, these are just testimonies and allegations presented under oath, not the final verdict. But the fact that they were presented under oath is very interesting, right? But what they reveal, how prosecutors, what they reveal is what prosecutors and how prosecutors believe the events have unfolded, right? And so, like I said, I want to deal with the 5 biggest, bombshells from the transcripts, right? And number one we're going to deal with is the gang and the East and West Coast rivalry, right? One of the first revelations discussed in the transcripts involves the roles of street gangs during the height of Death Row and Bad Boy rivalry. According to the testimonies from Crip members, Crip member Devontae Lee, right? Basically said that members of the Southside Crips were frequently around artists connected to Bad Boy Records. Those artists allegedly included the Notorious B.I.G., Little C's, members of Junior Mafia, the R&B group Total. Lee testified that the only artist they didn't associate with was Little Kim. This is all in the grand jury testimony. The only artist that they didn't associate with was Little Kim. On the other side, prosecutors say members of the Bloods were affiliated with Death Row Records. Like I say, a lot of the stuff, for the people who understood, about that before it came to be a case and people began to testify to the grand jury, basically that there were 2 sides to this situation. But with that context, the context of that is very important because it shows how the music rivalry overlapped with existing gang alliances, if you will. So how that overlapping of that whole situation, made for a very dangerous situation, right? Now, the Death Row medallion incident, right, is another key allegation in the transcript that centers around something that might sound small but had a major role in the situation. According to the testimony, Death Row founder Suge Knight gave gold medallion, diamond Death Row medallions to close associates of Death Row for the Christmas of 1995, right? These medallions became status symbols, but prosecutors say that Crips gang members allegedly snatched one of the medallions from a rivalry at the Lakewood Mall shortly before the Las Vegas shooting, right? And that incident allegedly escalated the tensions. Now, like I said, once again, I've heard a lot of stories about that. I don't really know anything about that. As to some people say, yeah, the chain got snatched. Some people say the chain never got snatched. Keffe D told the Art of Dialogue that the chain never got taken. And so, like I said, once again, you can understand why the situation is so murky. And there's a lot of he say, she say in regards to that particular situation or that incident itself. And it involved Orlando Anderson, if you will, right? And that was supposedly be the catalyst that led up to the Vegas thing. Oh, there he is right there over there. That's the guy that, snatched the chain. Like I said, from Frank Alexander's perspective, he said that something was whispered into Tupac's ear. And he was standing right next to Tupac once again, not just giving proximity a pass, but like I said, I don't think Frank would have anything to lie about. Now, what was said in Tupac's ear, don't know. But like I said, once again, Frank Alexander had testified that something was whispered in Tupac's ear. Not only did he testify to that, but he also talked about it on various podcasts and things like that, interviews that he had done while he was alive, right? Like I said, so and then you got to deal with the $1 million the bounty that Keffe D testified to, and like I said, once again, I think this is where last week when I did the because Keffe D's attorney, Michael Pandulo, basically came out and said that they might subpoena Sean P. Diddy Combs, and they believe that somehow Sean P. Diddy Combs would be the person that would help Keffe D or may change the leverage in Keffe D's favor if he came to court and said, hey, no, Keffe D was lying. He never met with me. I never put a hit on him, blah, blah, blah. Because now Keffe D is basically saying, no, I did all of that for fame and money and attention to try to sell my book, whatever, right? And so, like I said, I flip back to wrong person. The person that would be best under any circumstances that would be able to come and testify in court that could give Keffe D another key at life would be Suge Knight. That's the only person I can see that could come to court and say, if they said, if Suge took the stand, hypothetically, if Suge took the stand and they asked him, Mr. Davis is right here in the courtroom, did you see him in the white Cadillac? Because Mr. Davis said that you and him made eye contact. Did you see Mr. Davis in the white Cadillac as you guys were being shot at? And whether Suge Knight said yes or no, I didn't see him. Did you see him in Las Vegas that weekend? Right? All of those things, that's the best thing that Keffe D possibly could have from getting out under this case. Like I said, he had filed 2 motions. One earlier when he had Carl Arnold as an attorney, and Carl Arnold filed a motion to try to get the charges dismissed based on the fact that Keffe D thought he had some kind of immunity or profit deal. He produced no profit deal or no immunity, no kind of agreement with the government, right? Like I said, I don't know who his attorney was at the time, but he produced nothing. That was his first, I would say, way he could have got out, or the charges may have been dismissed if he presented that to the court. He couldn't present that. So that motion was denied. This recent motion in regards to the evidence that they obtained while they raided his house, they were trying to get that suppressed. That motion was denied. Once again, dramatically shifting the leverage to the prosecution side. And as we seen just last week, Keffe D's attorney, Michael Pandulo, coming out, and they coming out talking about the Sean P. Diddy Combs situation, how, they might perhaps, subpoena him. I'm saying wrong person to subpoena, right? Because that all depends on if they're leading with the $1 million bounty allegation. You see what I'm saying? If they're leading with that, then that's relevant. That becomes relevant. But if they're not, the only person, and I'm going to say this for a third time, the only person that could possibly get Sean P. Diddy Combs, Keffe D, a get out of jail free card, or give him the key to the courtroom and the handcuffs that he's in when he's in that courtroom, is Suge Knight. And it's point blank period. Nothing else. There's nothing else, because they're going to use each and everything that Keffe D said. Now, giving the credibility aspect of Suge Knight, and they say, well, hey, his credibility, because then it opens up a lot of doors and things that the prosecution can now do. But if Suge Knight said that, no, I didn't see him, he wasn't in the car, they go back and they say, well, we heard on this day, on this tape, you said, it wasn't Orlando Anderson who was the shooter. Do you know who the shooter was? Are you going to tell us? And then Suge Knight all of a sudden turns into this hostile witness. Well, I'm not saying nothing. I'm not, blah, blah, blah. It could be disastrous, right? But like I said, that's the only person, in my opinion, that I think that could possibly help Keffe D in this situation, right? So, when you deal with the transcript, as far as, the most controversial claim in the transcript, and like I said, once again, because celebrity, when, celebrity case name is, is in the case, it's big news, as well as the Diddy situation with Cassie basically saying that, hey, you know what? She testified in her civil case that they were going to try to go do something to Suge Knight over at, Jerry's Deli in West LA, right? And so that all ties into what I'm saying in regards to the Suge Knight thing. They had some kind of standoff. It was this, that's why one of the assistants, basically testified that Diddy kind of made him go, and they had guns, and Cassie said that she would hold guns, but Cassie specifically brought up Suge Knight's name involving the case, her civil case against Diddy. Once again, that corroboration of information and that still thing going on in between them two in regards to whatever that was and what kind of beef or whatever that was, even years after Tupac had been killed, from that perspective, right? Like I said, we know, according to Keffe D, right, he told investigators that Sean P. Diddy Combs offered $1 million for the heads of Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight. Combs has denied it He denied all of the allegations, has never been charged or named as a suspect in Tupac's murder. But the allegation appears in the transcripts because Keffe D told investigators about it during the interviews. Right? So, you know, you talking about the way it could go if it goes somewhere. That's one of the ways that it can go. And like I said, I don't think that they're going to lead with that because there's a lot of speculation there. And if a prosecutor is a good prosecutor, they definitely not going to lead with that $1 million thing because it's so unsubstantiated. And Sean P. Diddy Combs has been on it. And that's why I think that, you know, it would be a bad idea for them to call Sean P. Diddy Combs because then they open up a can of worms. But that's why I say this shit is going to be interesting, right? And like I said, the night of the shooting, the transcript also revisits what happened the night that Tupac was shot. According to the testimony and accounts include in the case, Pac and Suge were riding in the black BMW heading to Club 662 in Las Vegas. The club was owned by Suge Knight. Its name reportedly came from the numbers spelling mob on the telephone keypad, as we all know, or as we all don't know, because I don't like to, you know, assume that everybody knows it, right? Referencing a mob, right? At one point, Tupac reportedly leaned out of the car window to acknowledge fans who were calling out his name, according to Davis, according to Keffe D, once again, right? That moment gave the attackers an opportunity. Like I said, all of this information, you know, was given to, you know, the grand jury by Keffe D, and he didn't even testify, you know, in the grand jury, but it seems that his statements when he testified and talked to the police and all of those things, basically he testified. He didn't testify physically at the grand jury, but he testified at the grand jury for the grand jury by the statements that he gave to the police and Greg Kading and the U.S. attorney and all of those. But more importantly, the statement that he gave to the Metropolitan Police Department in Las Vegas. I think that's going to be the most damning thing because once again, you sitting down and that's on tape. So they're going to be listening to that tape. They're not going to be looking. There's going to be probably a transcript of it, but they're going to be listening to that tape, right? And like I said, who fired the shots, ladies and gentlemen? Like I said, this is where the transcripts reveal competing claims, right? So the competing claims for years, you know, Keffe D said that Orlando, you know, Anderson, his nephew, was the shooter, right? But another witness testified that Big Dre, DeAndre Smith, later admitted he fired the shots because Anderson couldn't get a clear shot, right? You know, that's going to be something, like I said, that's going to be a big argument. Will it matter? We'll see, right? So there's conflicting stories about that one. I think Keffe D's statement about his nephew shooting Tupac weighs a little bit more heavier because he was in the car than somebody telling somebody else something about something that leads more to the hearsay aspect of it, especially when you're dealing with it in court. You know, people like to take a firsthand, you know, account of what was going on. Keffe D's the firsthand account of what was going on, right? Like I said, but you know, rest in peace, Orlando and DeAndre, and like I said, Tupac and all of the people that have lost their life because of this crazy situation, right? So the jury may ultimately be left weighing testimony and credibility. That's what I'm talking about. Like I said, when I say that, you know, somebody saying something, you know, the credibility of who they believe is going to be the big thing, right? So they're going to be weighing the testimony and the credibility rather than direct eyewitness identification, if you will. You know, in the case against Keffe D, you know, like I said, we know it in September 2023. It's all been almost, you know, damn near 3 years. You know what I mean? That Keffe D's been in jail for this situation, right? And he was indicted for the murder of Tupac Shakur. Prosecutors say that although he didn't pull the trigger, this is what they're saying. Prosecutors saying although he did not pull the trigger, he allegedly orchestrated the attack as a leader within his gang, right? And being a gang leader, right? Keffe D has pled not guilty. His defense team argues that he's previously corroborated. And this is the craziest part. Like I said, once again, I found this to be interesting. When they went for the motion to dismiss the case the first time, Keffe D's defense attorney his argument was that he previously cooperated with law enforcement and should be protected by immunity agreements connected to the interviews in 2008 and 2009. I'm gonna say that again. See, because most people really, truly, honestly overlook this. They say what makes you laugh, the same thing that makes you laugh will make you cry, right? And this statement right here proves it. Keffe D's defense team argues that he previously cooperated with the law enforcement and should be protected by immunity agreements. Listen, immunity agreements connected to interviews in 2008 and in 2009. Ladies and gentlemen, Keffe D had a bite at that apple when Carl Arnold was his attorney. And the bite at that apple failed. Keffe D has recently had a bite at another apple in regards to trying to suppress the evidence. And the bite at that apple failed. So, when you understand what I've been saying, without even testifying before the grand jury, Keffe D testified before the grand jury with that 2009 statement more so than the 2008 statement. Because the 2009 statement will be admissible. The 2008 is questionable, but anything can happen. But that 2009 statement will be admissible based on the fact at the beginning of the interview, the police officer or the detective asked Keffe D, have you been promised anything to give this interview? And he said no. So with that being said, and then he basically ran down and reiterated everything that he told Greg Kading and the U.S. Attorney's Office in 2008. He told the Las Vegas Police Department that everything in 2009. You know? And so when that evidence is presented, when they sit down and they play the tape recording of him saying that, how does Keffe D's attorneys basically come back and try to put up the proper defense as to his own words being played on tape? And why would you say that? You know what I mean? It's going to be hard as hell. Yeah, this is you know. So like I said once again, when you think about the situation overall, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr., he tried to get himself involved with the situation involving testifying in front of the grand jury. But like the video I did yesterday, if you watched it, you'll understand that Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. actually lied to the grand jury. He lied to the grand jury. He also, like I said in the interview, he lied when he said that it wasn't until after the fight. It wasn't until after the fight that he knew. As a head of security, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. said it wasn't until after the fight that he knew that Frank Alexander was the only security guard on Tupac. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you that is categorically, without any shadow of a doubt, a lie. A lie. And the reason why, like I said it before, I'll say it again. And the reason why we know that is a lie is because Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. even tried to back that up with another lie by saying that he spoke to Tupac earlier that day. And Tupac had asked him, why I told you I don't want Frank on me no more, man. I told you I want Kevin Hackey on me. And instead of telling, this is real talk, instead of telling Tupac, Kevin Hackey not working today, right? He said, according to the interviewer, he said that Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. told him that, all of the other security guys are at the club, right? But Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. knew that Frank Alexander was the only one on Tupac. How do we truly, honestly know that? because Tim Matthews, I believe his name, Tim Matthews, who was Michael Moore's roommate, testified on Bums First, talking to Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. and Gullible John, and saying that Reggie pulled Michael Moore off of Tupac later in the evening, right before they were about to go to the MGM Grand to the fight. Get it? So if he said he talked to Tupac, right? And Tupac asked him, well, hey, how come you got Frank on me? Then Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. knew right then and there that Frank was going to be on him. Because he didn't say anything about anything else, according to Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. He just talked about Frank. He said nothing about Michael Moore. Why Michael Moore on me? He didn't say that. But the conversation that Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. alleged to have with Tupac Shakur is a lie. It's a lie. Once again, he's trying to place himself close to the proximity of the situation, but it's a lie. Just like when he asked Frank Alexander to lie about Orlando trying to snatch the gold chain. But more importantly, Tim, who also was working for Reggie the Rat Wright Jr.'s failed security company, said that Reggie pulled Michael Moore off of Tupac that night. So there's two ways that we would know. We would know, number one, Tim said that Reggie pulled him off of him. So Reggie would have known that Frank Alexander was the only one on him, right? Number two, he said that he talked to Tupac. Well, when he talked to Tupac, he would have known, that Frank Alexander was the only one on him, because he said Tupac told him, hey, how come you got this guy on me? You see what I'm saying? This is right before the fight, ladies and gentlemen. This is right before the fight. As a matter of fact, when they get to the fight, Tupac and Frank were waiting around for Suge, and Tupac, by Frank's admission, told Frank to go call Reggie, the Rat Wright Jr., to find out where Suge was. Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. didn't talk to Frank, from my understanding of it, and Suge finally arrived. But Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. told that story. He would have never been able to tell that story if Frank didn't tell it first, because he never talked to Reggie the Rat Wright Jr., remember? Remember, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. said, I didn't find out till after Listen. Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. said what? I didn't find out till after the fight that Frank was the only person on Tupac. If when Tupac told Frank to go call Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. to find out where Suge was right before the fight, would he been able to say that? No. Because he would have known from that interaction that Frank was the only person on Tupac. So it's all a lie. This guy's been lying to us for a long time, ladies and gentlemen. You know what I mean? Like I said, once again, if you're not able to put this together, and like I said, certain people wanted to be able to get out in front of the media and try to, control the narrative. Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. has a very big ego, right? And see, when you have a very big ego, a lot of times your ego is not your amigo. You get it? Your ego is not your amigo. And like I said, for thinking people, you know what I mean, who humble themselves and say, okay, cool, you moving diligently and with purpose and you know what I mean, and with respect and with dignity and with character and with credibility, right? You don't have to move like that. But when you're moving with your ego and you really are nothing, but you want people to think that you're something, you know what I mean, then you're moving with your ego. And a lot of times, I'm going to say it again, that your ego is not your amigo. It's not your friend, And so, like I said, it's going to be interesting, man. But like I said, who shot Tupac is really of no consequence at this particular point, because, like I said, Keffe D, he basically copped to being there. He copped to, giving his nephew the gun. And it's like what the jury's interpretation of the case is going to be is the ultimate decision that's going to be made in this situation, right? So like I said, so here's where things stand at. Like nearly 30 years after Tupac's death, the case is finally heading into a courtroom soon, right? We in February, March, April, May, June, July, August. We're going to be there, you know what I mean? And minus some kind of a plea deal, It's going to get interesting. It's going to get interesting. Man, do you think that I'm gonna throw this out there? Do you think Keffe D should take a plea? If you do, put the thumbs up in the chat, please. I appreciate that. If you think Keffe D should take a plea, if you think he should take it to trial, put a thumbs down or X or check, right? Yeah. If you think Keffe D should take a plea, put the thumbs up. If you don't think he should take a plea, put the thumbs down. I just want to see what people thinking, like, in that situation based on the information that you know and the things that you've heard and so on and so forth, right? So 30 years after Tupac's death, is heading to a courtroom. But the grand jury transcript show just how complex. Listen, the grand jury transcript shows how complex the story really is, right? You got multiple witnesses, different versions of events, right? And decades of history surrounding one of the most influential artists ever, right? The question is now for the courts to decide. But the conversation continues. Like I said, yo, I appreciate y'all time. Thank you for tuning in. Your boy Delray, straight gang.
They said Tupac was untouchable, but behind the walls of Rikers Island, he was just a man, wounded, watching his back, and wondering who he could trust. He survived bullets, betrayal, and isolation behind bars. But what happened inside those walls has never been told until now. In the darkest corner of Rikers, he found betrayal and a brotherhood no one saw coming. These dudes smiled in my face, then flipped and tried to kill me, and I never saw it coming. They were Puff's security, Biggie's muscle, Henchman's people, and Tupac knew exactly who sent them. This is the side of Tupac Shakur the world never got to see, told by the man who lived it with him, not in the studio, but in a 6x9 cell. The rap battles, sex and drama with female guards, the tears, the silence after Jada Pinkett's visit, and the moment Tupac almost broke. Before Death Row, before All Eyes on Me, before Machiavelli, there was Rikers. Behind the Walls with Tupac Shakur, available now on Amazon. Get your copy. Learn the truth.